Hi there, friend. It's evening here. Very beautiful evening. We had, I think, daylight saving this Sunday. We are on Tuesday. Tuesday? Yes. And here I am after work, looking after the children while mommy is making some dinner. There's this little one and the two playing in the front yard. You will see them move around now and then and they make some noise. And this topic of today is actually around the children. It is becoming a very controversial topic these days, a very existential type of question. And hear me out. I come from a community or a society or a culture where children are a blessing, b a sort of a investment in a sense, sort of a labor for families, for small farming slash agricultural communities. The more kids you had, that time at least, the better, the more labor you have for the chores of the house. So I come from that culture. I do remember back in maybe 2010, I was speaking to my mother about another cousin of mine, checking how many kids she had. And my mom told him, oh, she didn't get any blessings really. She only has three children. And that time I was laughing because I was coming from the West where actually three children is way too many children. Now, children or no children, that's quite a question these days. Obviously, there are a lot of other things involved apart from culture. I do still believe that children are a blessing from God. I do still believe that my life is better with the children than without the children. Obviously, they come with their own minds and there are costs involved. With the small ones like this one, you cannot actually go work, or at least one of you should stay home. But even if they go work, then it's going to cost you money to look after them, which was not the case back then because you had enlarged family. So that's the first cost. Either you're not working or you're spending money at a kindergarten or a child care facility. And in terms of time, whether you take them to a facility or you keep them home, you still don't have enough time to do your own things. You cannot go to movies because you need a babysitter, which are pretty expensive here. I even never used one of those. Technically, there are a lot of things you cannot do. You cannot go climb a mountain. You cannot travel when they're this small, and when they are grown up a little bit, 4 5 years, etc. To travel with them, it's a bit of a chore. They are all over the place. They, when you're traveling, sleeping hours are different, so it's no more. You sacrifice a lot of fun moments for the sake of children. So that's a very another cost involved in terms of time, in terms of your own me time, your own entertainment. It gets reduced. Obviously, they eat food. That's another financial cost. You eat food, right? You do eat food sometimes. Okay. You also need a better accommodation. If I was alone, I could sleep in a car if it comes to that, but I could share a room with the other people. It's easier to live in an apartment, but with the children, they make noise in the apartments. People might get angry. You might need some more space for them to play. You definitely need a room for them because as they grow, you cannot stay in the same room. So there is that cost. And in cities like Auckland or Sydney or London, perhaps most big cities, it is becoming quite expensive to have a house of your own. Even to have an apartment, it is becoming quite pricey. So that's another consideration. And the majority of, not probably the majority, but a good number of people claim or say they cannot afford to have children because the lodging is very damn expensive. So that's another cost. Then you jump into education, obviously. And New Zealand's got to subsidize the system where children can do primary and all the way to high school for almost free. There's a donation, but it's in the region of 200 New Zealand dollars. It's not expensive. But then if you want a good education for them, you start to think of private. They can cost upwards to 20,000 a year, which is pretty expensive. So that, and the college, for most part, it is in New Zealand, they can take a student loan that they'll pay themselves, but they still need parents' support, if you ask me. So they will cost you from day one to day X. Now, my prayer is that when the children grow, they are independent. They don't need me. Say as they reach after college, my first prayer is that they grow up as a good children. They get the best education I can afford, and after college, they get their jobs and they don't need my support. Having said that, I have to be prepared as a parent. We have to be prepared for a kid who might not perform as good as we want, or who might need a little bit of a kickstart sort of push now and then. So we have to think of that. So having some equity in your house can help. The majority of Kiwis children are buying their homes using what they call the bank of mom and dad. That is basically mom and dad helping them to put down the deposit, or at least they have got an accommodation for them, for kids to stay in while they save for the for the deposit or down payment for their own homes, things like those. So now, if you chose to not have children for any of the reasons, it's none of my business, to be honest. Um, I make my choice. I sit down and I think. And when it comes to children, of course, with your wife, you have one. How else to get children? Anyway, I just need to make sure that you are on the same wavelength and decide what is best for you. I do hope that the children will keep good relationships with me. That's very important. And that maybe my old age won't be super lonely. But at the same time, I do try to save and to do things for my own retirement so that I do not have to rely on them, at least financially. And they're also trying to prepare them so that they do not rely on me as I get older financially. Uh, we come, as I said, from a culture that helped the elders, but I don't want to be a burden to my children, and I hope I won't be. Yeah, that's all the talk around children. As you can see, you cannot do much with these around, but I am trying. I do have a full-time job, which I work most of the time at home, and it does help a little bit. And I do not do a lot of entertainment for obvious reasons. But again, I grew up in a very humble settings. We didn't have a lot of things going on. There was no nightlife, so I'm not missing much, to be honest. I did a bit of traveling, probably much more than I ever thought I would or could afford. So I've scratched that itch. I'm not missing much. The only worry now is just to make sure the children are growing up with the right skills they need to be men and the women, good citizens of New Zealand and of the world, and that they make contribution to their families. I'm not super ambitious. I don't think any of my children will change the world, but I hope they will be useful for to themselves and to their families, which is quite a hard thing these days. The life is so expensive. I feel for young people, it's gonna be pretty hard, but I hope they will make it. Okay, guys, that's all I have to say today. If you have any more comments on this subject, please leave them down below. And okay, have a good one. Cheers.